Hello everyone. So this is going to be an audio of me reading Accidental Romance, Prologue, and Chapter 1. Ella paid no attention to the lecture in her class. Her mind was cluttered with thoughts much too sensitive to talk about. At least to her it was. Home life could be difficult at times. Her parents had good intentions for her. Many of the arguments were about her. Her parents had one thing in mind for her when it came to her future. Ella had other goals she wanted to accomplish. She took this opportunity to jot down her goals on paper. The sound of her pen against the paper was the only thing that she could hear. Nothing else interfered with her thought process. Become a writer, by any means, she thought to herself. Ella loved to write. It was her passion. Even her literature teacher picked up on that. Ella excelled in writing to an exponential degree. She was admired for her ability to take anything and create a fantastic story. Her niche was romance. She had a way with words to draw a person in and make them feel like they were part of the story. Take solace in the little things. Don't dwell on the bigger and grander things. They can steer you in paths unwanted. Ella moved on to her next goal. Ella was big on enjoying the little things in life. She took pride in them and sought them out on a regular basis. Her style reflected on this as well. She didn't dress too flashy, nor was she intent on keeping up with popular trends either. She dressed to her tastes and what made her feel comfortable with herself. This garnered the attention of someone she had no idea that even existed. Find love and happiness. Ella sighed out loud. This would be difficult for her as she was an introvert. She liked being alone and didn't go out looking for attention from anyone. She just liked being alone. She could think better that way. She was always branded as depressed, which certainly was not the case. She just felt awkward around people and felt more comfortable on her own. Was this goal impossible? No, just difficult, which is why it was last on her list. The school bell rang, bringing her attention back to reality. She placed her pen and books into her backpack, zipping it all the way. She folded her litter of accomplishments neatly and placed it in her jacket pocket. No one must know about this, not even her parents. They would find some way to prove her goals asinine, to say the least. They would go to great lengths to convince her that's not where she should be in the future. She rushed out of class, heading for her locker to drop her letter off and pick up books for the next class. As she rushed through the sea of students, she accidentally bumped into someone. She didn't lose her bearings, luckily. "I'm terribly sorry," a young man said, extending his trembling hand to Ella. "It's okay." Ella took his hand and brought herself up. She brushed herself off and politely nodded her head. "Thank you," she awkwardly spoke. She quickly left, not giving the young man time to reply, which was a blessing in disguise to him. He himself felt awkward by the situation. A faint sigh of relief and a moment to breathe correctly, the young man spotted a folded note. He picked it up and assumed it belonged to Ella. He shoved it in his pocket, hoping to gather the courage to confront her with it. He was an introvert as well, and his name was John. He liked being alone, not being surrounded by people. It made him feel unresponsive to life when around too many people. Being at school was one of those places that made him feel a little uneasy because of the volume of people. But school was a necessity. There was no getting around it. The one thing that helped John cope with this was, in fact, Ella. The first day John saw her, he felt the environment didn't affect him. It was as if her presence alone was his cure, but not entirely, though. He soon found that trying to approach her was still just as difficult as being around people in the masses. He realized how sad it was when you liked someone, but you were so socially inclined that you couldn't even say hi to a girl you liked. Today, John would make sure things would go differently. He had something of Ella's that needed to be returned. He had no right to keep it, nor need to. During lunch, he would find her and simply explain that she dropped it in the hall. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing could go wrong, right? He just needed to get through one more class, and during this class he would build up the courage to actually approach the girl he liked. His science class was much too long. He was beginning to become antsy in his seat, mentally keeping a countdown of the minutes and seconds till the bell rang. His teacher lingered on the subject of human biology, while John's thoughts trailed off on what his opening statement would be to Ella. "Okay, class, I want you to take note that there is a test on Friday for everything we just learned today," the science teacher announced. Groans from students rolled in through the class, causing the teacher to shake his head at the outcome. The bell rang, and the stampeding feet of the science class bolted. John was the last to leave, feeling a bit upset to his stomach. His pace was slow, but he did make it to lunch. The cafeteria was bustling, and the sounds of silverware echoed. John saw Ella. She was in the corner eating by herself, as usual. Her face was buried into her paper that she vigorously wrote on. John gulped and set one foot forward. His knees started knocking against each other. His stride was slow but consistent. With each step he was growing very hesitant. John reached halfway when he suddenly stopped. He couldn't go any further. The hand that held the letter shook visibly. "Shit, I can't do it." Chapter 1. And done. Ella hit send on her newest romance. 12 years went by, and Ella went on to complete each of her goals, except for one: love. Ella was known locally for her romance stories every week in newspapers. She grew out of her introverted phase as she started gaining attention for her stories. Her romances evolved drastically over the years. They are rich in romance and definitely popular among the women statewide in Tennessee. She was so consumed with her writing that she never had time for herself. Even though they were short stories, it took a lot of time and research to make them worth reading and authentic as possible. Every place she visited had been for research purposes and not really for herself. Every week was a new romance that had ladies swooning and drooling and craving more. Ella's weekly romance was sent and waiting for the head editor to look it over. It was typical to receive a response in a few days. Most of her stories were printed anyways, regardless of their content. Once Ella finished one romance, it was on to another one. That was how she worked. Plus, she was only given a week's time to get more content out to begin with. Ella never ran dry when it came to writing. She took a little break in her study. She needed a fresh new idea for her next story. "I think Ella's romance corner needs a story about dancing," she later beamed with excitement. Ella rushed to her computer and searched for studios that taught dance, any kind of dance. Most of them weren't around close by. Travel was needed to make sure she could experience everything that came with dancing. She scrolled for a while until a studio sparked her interest. Ballroom dancing, huh? Seems romantic enough, depending on the type of dance, I suppose. Ella was intrigued. She clicked on its link and was directed to their site. It was neatly organized and easy to find what was needed. The sound of her clicking mouse filled in her studio. Her eyes wandered across many types of dances. Each dance had its own description that elegantly summed up its meaning. Tango? No. Too much love-hate. Salsa? Maybe. We'll come back to that. Rumba? Too steamy, it seems. Ella read through all the types of dances. She came across one that did jump out at her. It seemed to fit what she was looking for. Waltz, huh? She read it over and over again. It fit perfectly. It was magical, elegant, and the very thought of adding this experience to her story drew her in. She noted its number for the studio and began making the call for classes. Yes, I'd like to sign up for classes. A muffled voice could be heard on her phone, asking her what she was interested in and if she had a partner to attend with. I'm interested in the waltz, and unfortunately, I don't have a partner. Ella was told that a partner would be assigned to her upon arrival. Payment plans were discussed for the classes as well as dress attire and shoes. Ella chose the full experience. She wanted to know basic of steps, right down to the most difficult. Classes were set and scheduled. Ella looked forward to gaining the right kind of knowledge for her next story. Ella knew the right things to do when it came to authenticity. That's what made her popular among the local readers. They adored her passion and the time she dedicated to educating herself in anything unknown to her. The only thing that truly affected her was not being able to do these things for herself and a possible mate. It kind of saddened her knowing that everything she'd done was only for providing entertainment. No time for this kind of thinking, Ella, she shook herself. She made a notation on her calendar of when her classes began, the times and how long each class would be. She chose night classes because people tend to be there for relaxation purposes and seem to enjoy it more. Every Friday night was marked boldly in red. Ella flashed a quick smile to herself and headed off to the kitchen to prepare a much-needed lunch for her hungry belly. A sudden grunt spilled with the hard thud of a heavy item. John brushed his hands together and examined his new surroundings. He imagined his belongings in the newly built loft. It had the perfect atmosphere for a painter. Plenty of sunshine, but balanced off with just the right amount of shade. John began settling in little by little. The first things to find a new home were his tools. With a delicate hand, his tools were placed in the center of the lofty residence. Once his painting station was set up how he wanted it, he finished moving his things to its proper place. The day was quite productive, you see. John moved back into his hometown. He left shortly after graduation from high school. He pursued his passion for painting. He gained plenty of knowledge while on his own. He traveled to picturesque places, explored new artistic materials to better himself, and even sold a few of his works. In time, he too grew out of his introverted phase. It was time to come back home, hopefully to find a new muse and inspiration for his next piece, which he was confident would be his masterpiece. The last box of his belongings hid in the shadows. It had no label, not like the other boxes. He opened it up expecting to be handling some last-minute things. He dug through it all, only to find its contents were just a bunch of miscellaneous things. Junk, if you will. Just as John was about to consider the whole thing trash, he stumbled upon an item that brought back lots of memories for him. It was Ella's letter. He kept it all these years, still finding no courage to return it. He forgot he even had it. He smiled to himself and placed it aside, making sure not to mix it up with the junk that gathered around him. John tossed all the unwanted things into a big trash bag, put it by the front door, to remind him the next morning to throw it away. I wonder if she's even still here in Tennessee, John wondered. He shrugged it off and assumed she'd be long gone by now. Why would she even stay here? What did the state have to offer her for success? His train of thought wandered too much. John remembered that the realtor told him where the daily newspaper would be dropped off. He scouted out the area and found the spot. Several newspapers had collected, but the current one was on top. That newspaper was really all that mattered at this point. John wanted to catch up on affairs that had been happening since he left. He browsed all the articles and stumbled upon a new section. Ella's Romance Corner. John was shocked to see her name. He looked through the section and found comments from fans printed. Each comment praised her and practically begged her for more. I see she's a writer. It's nice to know what became of her, John spoke in a soft and sincere voice. John glanced at the letter he had kept and decided he would return it to her. First things first, finding out how to actually get this letter to her. Day turned to night too quickly, and John retired for the night. As soon as he had time and knew where to send this letter of hers, he would return it. This time, I'll be able to approach her without any awkwardness to interfere. John turned the lights out and soon succumbed to slumber. Morning came, and Ella checked her messages for any updates on her newest submission for the paper. She clicked on the unread email and was very pleased to see a response from the head editor. Her story was accepted and sent off to be printed for next week's paper. Looks like I won't be a starving artist this week either, Ella said with a chuckle. Breakfast was the next thing on her mind. She cleaned up and treated herself to comfort food from her favorite local diner. The older couple that ran it was the absolute definition of adorable. It was something that would get Ella envious at times, but she ultimately enjoyed seeing true happiness. Ella knew that her one true love would come, just not now, it seemed. The usual, hun? Janice, one of the waitresses, asked with her pen and order pad in hand. Yes, but do you think you could add extra cheese? Ella answered with a slight chirp. Coming right up. Janice smiled sweetly before retreating to the kitchen with the order ticket. Ella sat, letting her eyes wander, trying to find anything for inspiration, but the smell of food being cooked was much too distracting. Janice served Ella her morning coffee and toast while she waited for her breakfast to finish. She sipped her coffee and observed people walking by the window seat she was given. Before long, a hot plate of bacon, eggs, with extra cheese and sausage came into view. Ella dove in, then letting a satisfying hum escape. Janice came over to join Ella at her table. Not too many people were coming in, so Janice had time to spare. Janice leaned back and took a little breather. Hey, did you hear that the couple who runs this joint, their son is back in town? They're pretty excited, Janice began the conversation. That explains why I haven't seen them then, Ella chimed in. Yeah, their son left about 12 years ago to gain experience in painting. Apparently his reason for coming back is he needs a break. Janice leaned closer to Ella. If you ask me, that's just an excuse. That's basically saying he's fresh out of ideas and no place to go. Don't judge. Everyone has dry spells once in a while, Ella explained. Janice laughed through her nose. The cook waved Janice over to come get an order. Excuse me, duties wait. Ella smiled and nodded slightly while she continued to chow down on her breakfast. I didn't even know they had a son. Huh, Ella said to herself. John lingered in bed, not wanting to leave it. He groaned, knowing that he needed to get up and start his day. He didn't like not having any ideas to work with. It was like his mind went blank, and there was nothing good enough to paint. This was the worst part of being in the creative field. Those dreadful dry spells could be disastrous. John thumbed through the new morning paper. He read the articles that interested him and wanted to know about. He then saw an article about a dance studio on the outskirts of the county. That's not a bad idea. John gave it some thought and soon decided that his next work of art would be one depicting a person dancing. Dancing was something he shied away from. Painting a dancer was difficult because the artist had to make sure the body was painted perfectly to depict the mood that was being displayed. He called the dance studio that was mentioned and asked for details on each dance. From there he could choose which one would best suit him and the idea he wants to paint. The person on the other end gave him a list of dances and explained them in great detail. I think the waltz is the dance I'd be interested in, John informed. John was told he'd be provided a partner if he didn't come in with one. All the details were exchanged for the classes. John noted them in his daybook, making sure it was written in bold ink to signify importance. Once off the phone, John stared at absolutely nothing. He was very pleased with this idea, and he would be going to great lengths to make this his masterpiece. So that was an audio reading of the prologue and chapter 1. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if I stuttered or flubbed up a few words, it's because I'm slightly tired, so go figure. But yeah, so if you're interested in purchasing Accidental Romance, follow the link that is in the description bar, and happy reading!